The mafia boss kidnapped the wrong girl, but the plus-size baker fixed his family feud. He thought he had abducted a terrified cartel spy. The city's most ruthless mafia boss dragged her into his armored SUV. He expected tears. Instead, the plus-size baker completely ignored his loaded weapons. Yellow New York streetlights illuminated her furious face. She was screaming about a crushed raspberry tart. The dangerous men holding guns were completely silent. She didn't care about dying tonight. She only cared about her ruined pastry. Kidnapping the wrong girl in Brooklyn was a fatal mistake, but that single error saved his family. Clara Jenkins was currently drowning in the brutal American dream. At 27 years old, she proudly owned Clara's Crusts. It was a tiny, fiercely independent bakery in the beating heart of Brooklyn. The warm air inside always smelled of sweet vanilla and melting butter, but that comforting scent hid a deeply terrifying reality. Clara worked grueling 16-hour shifts every single day of the week. Her tired hands were permanently dusted with fine white flour. Her monthly bank statements were permanently stained with bright red ink. She owed the relentless bank a crushing $50,000. The final eviction notice sat heavily on her flour-dusted counter. The threat of losing everything was painfully real. They wanted to take away her only safe sanctuary. Society often overlooked her entirely because of her unapologetically plus-size figure. But inside this humble kitchen, she was an absolute artist. She poured her entire resilient soul into the rising dough. Baking was her only escape from the suffocating pressure of modern life. Tonight was supposed to be her ultimate saving grace. She had finally secured a massive catering order for tomorrow morning. Clara carefully pulled the final metal tray from the hot commercial oven. Golden, flaky raspberry tarts glistened beautifully under the harsh fluorescent lights. She had spent 6 painstaking hours folding the rich, buttery layers. She wiped a heavy bead of sweat from her exhausted forehead. Her curvy frame moved with surprising, graceful agility around the cramped kitchen. She boxed the delicate pastries with absolute, unwavering precision. Every single tart had to be completely flawless for the wealthy corporate clients. This single payment would keep the aggressive bank collectors away for another month. She smiled softly at her beautiful, sugary creations. She finally felt a fleeting, precious moment of pure pride. She reached over and turned off the massive industrial ovens. The comforting warmth of the room immediately faded. Late December in New York was absolutely unforgiving. The brutal winter wind aggressively rattled the thin glass windows. Clara reached blindly for the wooden coat rack near the back door. Her own thick, worn winter coat was missing. She remembered suddenly leaving it at her tiny freezing apartment. Shivering violently, she grabbed her roommate's jacket instead. It was a flashy, expensive, red leather trench coat. Her reckless roommate owed heavy money to some very dangerous people. Clara had absolutely no idea about that dark, deadly secret. She slipped the vibrant red coat over her thick woolen sweater. She picked up the fragile pastry box carefully with both hands. She locked the heavy metal security door tightly behind her. That simple, innocent wardrobe choice sealed her terrifying fate. But listen carefully, because what happened next in that dark alley would completely change her life. The narrow Brooklyn alleyway was a pitch-black ice rink. Biting cold wind immediately slapped against her flushed, warm cheeks. The sole ambient sound was the sharp crunch of freezing snow under her boots. Dim yellow street lamps flickered weakly in the thick, freezing mist. Clara walked quickly toward the safety of the main street. She clutched the white pastry box tightly against her chest. Then the ambient noise of the distant city abruptly died. The dark shadows against the cold brick wall suddenly shifted. The freezing winter air grew noticeably colder and incredibly oppressive. 3 massive figures detached themselves quietly from the surrounding darkness. They were heavily built men wearing identical, tailored black suits. They blocked the narrow alley exit completely with their broad shoulders. Clara froze instantly in her tracks. Her panicked heart slammed violently against her ribs. Did they want to steal her hard-earned money? She barely had 10 crumpled dollars in her flour-stained apron pocket. The tallest man stepped forward with terrifying, predatory silence. He didn't ask for her cheap leather wallet. He didn't ask for her real name. He only saw the targeted red leather coat in the deceptive darkness. He lunged forward with sudden, terrifying speed. A rough, foul-smelling burlap sack was violently yanked over her head. Total, suffocating darkness instantly consumed her entire vision. Clara gasped loudly in sudden, blinding panic. The delicate pastry box slipped from her violently trembling hands. It hit the icy concrete with a sickening, tragic crunch. Her masterpiece was completely destroyed. Strong, unforgiving arms grabbed her waist and lifted her easily. She kicked wildly into the empty, freezing night air. The heavy metal trunk of an armored SUV slammed shut above her. The massive engine roared loudly to life. She was completely trapped. The rough burlap sack was finally ripped away from her head. Blinding, ultra-modern chandelier light pierced her tear-filled eyes. Clara blinked rapidly against the sudden, painful brightness. She was kneeling on an impossibly soft Persian rug. The sprawling Manhattan penthouse screamed of untouchable, generational wealth. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows offered a dizzying view of the glittering skyline. The ambient air felt heavy, suffocating, and incredibly expensive. It smelled strongly of rich cedarwood and burning Cuban cigars. The three massive kidnappers stepped back into the dark shadows. A solitary man sat patiently in an oversized leather armchair. This was Vincent Vinnie Moretti. He was 34 years old and terrifyingly handsome. He methodically wiped a heavy metal silencer with a dark cloth. He radiated pure, concentrated danger. His tailored charcoal suit perfectly hugged his broad, muscular shoulders. Vincent finally raised his obsidian eyes to look at his prisoner. He expected a highly trained, desperate cartel spy begging for mercy. He leaned forward slowly with predatory, calculated grace. "Where is the stolen flash drive, Isabella?" he asked quietly. His deep, rough baritone voice vibrated through the silent room. "Who gave you the explicit order to betray our family?" Clara didn't answer his deadly questions immediately. She wasn't Isabella. Isabella was her chaotic, permanently broke roommate. Clara stared blankly at the polished mahogany coffee table. Her beautiful pastry box sat completely crushed and ruined. Sweet raspberry jam slowly leaked onto the pristine white rug. Her hands suddenly stopped shaking. The sheer audacity of this violent kidnapping, combined with the tragic sight of her ruined masterpiece, finally shattered her crippling panic. A hot, blinding wave of absolute rage completely consumed her exhausted mind. She slowly pushed herself up to stand at her full, unapologetic height. The heavily armed guards instinctively reached inside their dark suit jackets. Vincent held up a single, commanding finger to stop them dead. Clara marched directly toward the most feared mafia boss in New York. She pointed a shaking, flour-covered finger straight at his chest. A thick smear of yellow butter stained his expensive silk tie. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Clara yelled. "You ruined them! Those were my best raspberry tarts!" Vincent simply stared at her in profound, absolute shock. The deadly underworld kingpin was completely frozen. He had built an entire bloody empire on pure terror. Nobody ever raised their voice in his personal presence. "I spent 6 agonizing hours folding that delicate pastry dough," Clara continued fiercely. "Who is going to pay my overdue bank loan now?" She glared fiercely down into his dark, wide eyes. "You cannot bake 50 new pastries by tomorrow morning." Vincent slowly lowered his heavy, suppressed weapon. The aristocratic disdain vanished completely from his sharp, angled face. He looked at this furious, curvy woman in absolute disbelief. She was fiercely demanding pastry compensation from a ruthless killer. It was the most absurd, fascinating thing he had ever witnessed. But here is where the terrifying situation gets truly interesting. Vincent finally processed her angry, unhinged pastry rant. She was definitely not the targeted cartel spy. The stolen flash drive was completely lost. His elite men had blindly grabbed the wrong girl. The flashy red coat had completely fooled his best trackers. He pinched the bridge of his sharp, aristocratic nose. Releasing her now was absolutely not a viable option. She had seen his uncovered face tonight. She had seen the faces of his top lieutenants. The ruthless mafia code demanded complete, unforgiving silence. He ordered his men to carefully blindfold her again. They moved her immediately to a secure location. Clara was driven far outside the busy city. The heavy, armored SUV finally stopped hours later. They led her inside a sprawling, remote compound. It was Vincent's heavily guarded Long Island mansion. The massive estate was surrounded by high concrete walls. Dozens of armed men patrolled the freezing, snow-covered grounds. Vincent locked her inside the vast East Wing. He told her she would stay here indefinitely. He strictly forbade her from contacting the outside world. He left her completely alone in the silent, terrifying darkness. She was officially a prisoner of the dangerous underworld. Clara woke up the next morning feeling incredibly restless. The opulent bedroom felt like a beautiful, gilded cage. She wandered cautiously down the long, empty hallways. She eventually found the massive, state-of-the-art kitchen. It was outfitted with expensive, shiny stainless steel appliances, but the sterile room felt completely dead and unused. Her hungry stomach rumbled loudly in the quiet space. She opened the giant industrial pantry doors. She expected to find fresh, expensive gourmet ingredients. Instead, she found rows of depressing, sad cardboard boxes. It was a completely unacceptable culinary tragedy. The wealthy mafia syndicate ate like absolute garbage. The cold shelves held cheap canned tomato soup. There were dozens of chalky, tasteless protein bars. She found several loaves of incredibly stale white bread. This was the sad fuel of violent, emotionally dead men. It completely lacked any soul, warmth, or basic care. No wonder these dangerous criminals were always so angry. They were severely lacking basic human nourishment. A diet of pure sodium and cheap preservatives breeds pure violence. Clara stared at the expensive granite countertop in absolute disgust. Food was meant to heal, not just sustain. How could she survive on this terrible prison food? She grabbed a heavy black trash bag from the sink. She started aggressively throwing the canned food away. She tossed the stale bread into the dark bin. The loud clattering echoed through the pristine kitchen. A heavily armed guard peeked his head inside. He looked at the curvy woman in absolute confusion. Clara completely ignored his massive, intimidating assault rifle. She tied the heavy trash bag with an angry knot. She was taking full control of this depressing kitchen. But what happened next will completely surprise you. She raided the massive, freezing walk-in refrigerator. She finally found some hidden butter, garlic, and fresh herbs. She tied her dark hair into a messy, practical bun. She rolled up her borrowed red sleeves with fierce determination. The heavily guarded mansion was a fortress of toxic masculinity. Men outside stood freezing in the snow, holding heavy guns. Inside, Clara moved with beautiful, soft, feminine grace. She expertly chopped the sharp garlic with a heavy knife. She whipped the golden butter until it was perfectly light. She was fighting their cold violence with pure, undeniable culinary art. Her curves swayed naturally to an unheard rhythm. The armed guards outside the kitchen door nervously exchanged glances. They were trained to handle rival gang attacks. They were not trained to handle a furious baker. Clara aggressively banged metal pots and pans together. She hummed a cheerful, completely out-of-place pop song. She was intentionally claiming this hostile space as her own. She refused to cower in fear like a weak victim. Her fierce rebellion was completely domestic and incredibly powerful. She was reshaping their dark, terrifying world with simple ingredients. She found hidden bags of raw, unbleached flour. Her capable hands quickly kneaded a fresh, soft dough. She shoved the heavy metal trays into the hot oven. The industrial fans hummed loudly to life. The sharp, irresistible aroma of roasted garlic bloomed instantly. Sweet, rich, melting butter mixed with the savory herbs. The intoxicating scent forcefully pushed through the ventilation system. It crept silently under the heavy, locked mahogany doors. It completely bypassed the advanced laser security systems. Soon, the entire deadly mafia compound smelled overwhelmingly of warm garlic butter. Vincent Moretti paced his dark, empty bedroom. Sleep was an impossible luxury tonight. Crippling paranoia completely poisoned his exhausted mind. He expected a violent assassination attempt constantly. His ruthless uncle wanted him dead by morning. The bloody mafia war demanded his constant vigilance. He rubbed his tired, burning eyes heavily. The cold winter wind howled outside. The heavy silence of the mansion was suddenly broken. It wasn't the sharp sound of enemy gunfire. It was a completely different sensory shock. A thick, warm scent drifted under his heavy oak door. It smelled like slow-roasted tomatoes. It smelled like rich, bubbling mozzarella cheese. Vincent froze completely in his tracks. He gripped his silver pistol tightly. He stepped quietly into the long, dark hallway. The intoxicating aroma grew much stronger now. The scent cut through the sterile mansion air. It aggressively pulled him toward the sprawling east wing. He reached the massive wooden kitchen doors. He slowly pushed the heavy wood open. The bright fluorescent lights blinded him temporarily. He expected to find his armed guards sleeping. Instead, he found the kidnapped Brooklyn baker. Clara was leaning calmly against the shiny granite counter. She was humming a soft, gentle melody. A massive ceramic dish sat cooling on the hot stove. It was baked ziti, perfectly charred on the edges. But here is where it gets truly interesting. Vincent lowered his heavy weapon slowly. He stared at the bubbling pasta dish silently. The rich smell was completely intoxicating. He hadn't seen real food like this in years. Clara noticed his imposing presence immediately. She didn't cower or beg for her life. She casually pushed a ceramic plate toward him. It was a generous, steaming portion of the pasta. A heavy silver fork rested on the side. "You look completely exhausted," Clara said simply. "Eat it before the melted cheese gets rubbery." Vincent hesitated for a long, agonizing moment. His violent world was built on constant suspicion. Poison was a very common assassination tool. Yet, his empty stomach betrayed his logical mind. He slowly picked up the shiny silver fork. He took a small, cautious bite. The rich flavors instantly exploded in his mouth. The sweet basil perfectly balanced the acidic tomatoes. The hidden spices were blended in perfect harmony. The creamy ricotta melted seamlessly on his tongue. Vincent dropped the metal fork completely. It clattered loudly against the granite countertop. His obsidian eyes widened in absolute shock. This wasn't just a random pasta recipe. This was his late grandmother's exact signature dish. It was the legendary Moretti family recipe. His warring family had literally killed for this secret. Nobody had replicated that specific taste in 20 long years. The cold, ruthless Mafia Boss suddenly vanished. A profoundly broken, grieving man stood there instead. The brutal underworld briefly ceased to exist. The heavy burden of his violent empire briefly lifted. Deep, suppressed family trauma washed over him entirely. He stared at the curvy woman in absolute awe. Clara wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron. She looked at him with gentle, understanding eyes. She saw past his tailored suit and loaded gun. She saw a starving, deeply exhausted human being. The warm food acted as a powerful emotional anchor. It silently healed his fractured, paranoid mind. His heavily guarded heart finally cracked wide open. She was no longer just a random hostage. She was a beautiful, comforting piece of home. The tender moment died instantly. A massive explosion rocked the estate. High-pitched security alarms shrieked very loudly. Piercing sirens cut the cold night. Red emergency lights bathed the kitchen. Vincent's ruthless uncle had finally arrived. The traitor brought a brutal army. Heavy trucks smashed the iron gates. The outer perimeter fell within mere seconds. Elite guards died in the snow. Vincent pulled his silver pistol immediately. His soft expression turned to stone. The vulnerable man was completely gone. The deadly Mafia boss returned instantly. He grabbed Clara's flour-dusted arm tightly. "Move now." He dragged her behind the island. The massive marble counter offered cover. They crouched on the cold tile. Heavy combat boots pounded the hallway. Automatic gunfire erupted outside the door. Lethal bullets chewed through thick wood. Giant splinters rained over their heads. Clara covered her ears in terror. She pressed her face against her knees. The deafening noise was absolutely paralyzing. It was a symphony of destruction. Vincent returned fire with calm precision. He shot blindly into the corridor. 2 masked intruders dropped instantly dead. Heavy bodies hit the hardwood floor. The metallic smell of blood flooded in. The scent of rust filled the air. It mixed violently with melting cheese. Savory garlic fought the acrid gunpowder. This bizarre sensory clash was jarring. More desperate gunmen swarmed the doorway. Vincent shielded Clara with his body. He pressed her flat against the floor. Stay completely down. He reloaded his hot weapon flawlessly. An empty magazine clattered away loudly. A stray bullet shattered the window. Sharp glass shards showered the tiles. Freezing winter wind ripped inside violently. Vincent leaned fiercely over her frame. He took a painful bullet graze. Fresh blood soaked his white shirt. He didn't even flinch or complain. His absolute priority was her survival. He fired again and again relentlessly. The American underworld showed no mercy. Family loyalty meant nothing in this business. Greed fueled these bloody turf wars. Assault rifles tore the kitchen apart. The stainless steel refrigerator was shredded. Expensive copper pots clattered down violently. Ceramic bowls exploded into white dust. The culinary sanctuary became a war zone. Clara squeezed her tearful eyes shut. She smelled the choking gray smoke. It smelled strongly of rusted iron. Violent death hovered inches above her, yet the industrial oven remained untouched. Steady heat radiated behind her back. The family ziti continued cooking perfectly. Bubbling tomato sauce smelled incredibly rich. The stark contrast was absolutely mind-bending. Brutal death raged around family meals. The scent of home fought the violence. Vincent formed an unbreakable human shield. A booming voice echoed violently outside. The treacherous uncle demanded immediate surrender. The ruthless old man wanted blood. He promised absolute slaughter for everyone. Rival gunmen slowly advanced forward together. Vincent checked his last pistol magazine. He was severely outnumbered and outgunned. His loyal elite guards were dead. The situation looked entirely hopeless now. He looked down at the baker. He touched her cheek with bloody fingers. "I promise to protect you always." He prepared for a desperate suicide stand. He tightened his grip on the gun. He would gladly die defending this kitchen. He would die defending this woman. Now listen carefully to this part. Heavy footsteps approached the marble island. The rival syndicate prepared for the kill. Vincent took a steadying final breath. He braced his muscular legs to stand. He planned to draw their fire. He wanted Clara to escape safely. The Mafia Boss accepted his fate. He was ready to meet death. Clara grabbed his bloody wrist suddenly. She pulled him firmly back down. Her dark eyes showed strange calm. She smelled perfectly charred mozzarella cheese. The internal oven timer ticked down. Chaotic gunfire paused for a reload. The tense silence was incredibly heavy. The rival shooters reloaded their heavy weapons. Metal clips clicked sharply into place. Clara completely ignored the terrifying sounds. She focused entirely on the baking food. The thick aroma masked the bloody carnage. She refused to die in this mess. She refused to let Vincent die tonight. The Mafia war was loud and senseless. Her domestic domain offered quiet, absolute power. The massive marble counter shielded them perfectly. Bullets sparked against the tough stone surface. The freezing wind swirled the gray smoke. Clara tightened her grip on Vincent's arm. She silently ordered him to stay down. The culinary masterpiece was finally completely ready. A cheerful, high-pitched mechanical ding suddenly pierced the heavy silence. The simple oven timer sounded completely absurd in this war zone. Heavily armed rival killers froze with their fingers on triggers. Vincent tried to violently pull Clara back to the floor. She aggressively swatted his bloody hand away like a nuisance. She casually slipped on thick, heat-resistant silicone baking mitts. Bullets had literally destroyed half of the expensive kitchen walls. Yet she stood up tall right in the deadly crossfire. Her confident posture completely defied the ongoing brutal mafia shootout. The dangerous situation was instantly flipped entirely upside down. What happened next was absolutely unbelievable and truly bizarre. Clara calmly opened the heavy steel oven door without hesitating. A thick cloud of savory steam billowed out into the room. The intoxicating scent of perfectly charred lasagna fought the smoke. The rich aroma of baked ricotta was absolutely overpowering tonight. The brutal assassins visibly hesitated in the ruined wooden doorway. Their lethal assault rifles slowly lowered by a tiny fraction. The metallic smell of gunpowder was defeated by roasted garlic. These violent criminals suddenly transformed into starving, heavily mesmerized men. They stared at the golden cheese with wide, hungry eyes. Their cold stomachs growled loudly in the sudden quiet pause. Their deadly mission was instantly forgotten for a brief moment. The primal urge to eat completely overrode their violent instincts. Clara slammed the heavy baking tray onto the marble island. The loud clatter made seasoned killers flinch backward in fear. She grabbed a large wooden spoon and pointed it aggressively. "Are you completely out of your tiny, violent little minds? Did I cook for hours just to dodge flying bullets? Will you really ruin a perfect homemade Italian family meal? Shooting each other is clearly less important than eating food." She scolded the terrifying mafia army like small, disobedient toddlers. Her furious voice echoed through the utterly destroyed luxury mansion. She demanded absolute respect for her hard culinary work tonight. The ruthless uncle stared at the plus-size baker in disbelief. His elite squad looked awkwardly down at their loaded weapons. Vincent remained crouching behind the counter with his mouth open. He had never seen anyone scold a dangerous cartel boss. The terrifying tension evaporated completely into a bizarre, dark comedy. The ultimate power in this room didn't belong to guns. The real authority belonged to the angry woman serving dinner. She commanded the entire room with a simple baking dish. Clara tapped her wooden spoon against the ruined marble counter. "Put those ridiculous guns away before the cheese gets rubbery." The brutal men actually listened and lowered their heavy weapons. The deadly mafia war paused completely for a family dinner. The ruthless uncle stepped carefully over shattered glass. He stared at the defiant baker suspiciously. Clara did not flinch under his cold, deadly gaze. She reached into the nearby cooling rack smoothly. She pulled out a small silver tray proudly. It held fresh, hand-rolled ricotta cannoli. The delicate pastry shells were perfectly blistered. A light dusting of powdered sugar covered them. The sweet smell of fried dough filled the room. The aroma of rich vanilla bean was incredibly intoxicating. She shoved a warm pastry toward the old man. "Eat this before you kill your own nephew." The old mafia boss eyed the dessert cautiously. His highly trained bodyguards watched her every move. He slowly took the pastry from her hand. He took a small, hesitant bite. The crisp shell shattered loudly in his mouth. The sweet, creamy filling hit his tongue immediately. A heavy, shocking silence fell over the destroyed kitchen. The ruthless old man suddenly gasped aloud. His weathered hands began to shake violently. The heavy assault rifle slipped from his sweaty grip. It clattered loudly against the ruined marble floor. Thick tears welled up in his hardened, cruel eyes. This was his late mother's exact holiday recipe. The precise hint of cinnamon was utterly unmistakable. He hadn't tasted that sweet love in decades. The overwhelming nostalgia completely shattered his violent anger. He fell heavily into a nearby wooden chair. He buried his wrinkled face in his hands. He sobbed loudly like a lost, broken child. The bitter family blood feud instantly dissolved completely. The warring faction lowered their weapons in absolute shock. A brutal mafia war ended over a simple dessert. The rival army quietly retreated into the cold night. They left the destroyed mansion entirely peacefully. The bloody turf war was officially over forever. Vincent and Clara stood completely alone in the ruins. The expensive kitchen was a total disaster zone. Bullet holes ruined the beautiful mahogany cabinets, yet it felt incredibly warm and safe now. Vincent stepped closer to the curvy, exhausted baker. He gently took the wooden spoon from her hand. His obsidian eyes held deep, absolute reverence. He looked at her with pure, unfiltered admiration. He reached inside his ruined, bloody suit jacket. He pulled out a crisp, folded bank document. He placed it softly on the damaged marble island. "Your massive bakery debt is completely erased today. I personally bought the mortgage from those greedy bankers. The bank will never bother you again." Clara stared at the stamped banking paper blankly. A massive weight lifted from her tired shoulders. She was completely free from her endless financial nightmare. Her beloved little bakery was finally completely safe. She looked up at the dangerous cartel boss. She expected him to simply walk away now. She assumed her crazy underworld adventure was over. But listen carefully to what happened next. Vincent gently brushed a stray curl from her face. His calloused thumb traced her soft, full cheek. He stepped into her personal space with intense purpose. The raw, coiled energy returned between them instantly. He smelled of dark danger and rich cedarwood. I paid your aggressive bank collectors in full. You are finally free from your heavy financial burdens, but you are absolutely not free to leave me." His rough baritone voice was a hypnotic whisper. "You stopped a deadly war with your incredible warmth. My dark world desperately needs your bright light. I need your fierce courage by my side always. I will protect you from every single threat. Nobody will ever overlook your immense value again. You will never be invisible in this massive city. You will rule this powerful empire right beside me." Clara looked into his dark, obsessive eyes deeply. The sensible part of her mind urged extreme caution, but her wild heart deeply craved this ultimate power. She wanted this absolute, terrifying level of protection. She was no longer an invisible, struggling baker. She wrapped her flour-dusted arms around his neck. He pulled her lush curves tightly against his chest. She leaned forward and passionately kissed the Mafia Boss. The beautiful, plus-size woman fully embraced her dark throne. Kidnapping the wrong baker in Brooklyn saved his entire family. That single massive error changed everything forever. The deadly underworld learned a very shocking, unexpected lesson. Raw sincerity easily conquers heavy, loaded weapons. Vincent found his true salvation in a warm, homemade meal. Genuine warmth melts the absolute coldest, most violent hearts. You don't need a gun to stop a bloody war. A simple act of domestic care is incredibly powerful. It was the ultimate, satisfying twist of dark fate. This thrilling story proves the ultimate power of ordinary women. Clara was just a struggling girl chasing the American dream. She possessed absolutely no elite combat training or weapons, yet she completely dominated a room full of trained killers. Her ordinary domestic skills became an unstoppable, fierce weapon. A wooden baking spoon easily defeated heavy assault rifles. True strength lies in unbreakable, unshakable feminine composure. Women hold immense power in their daily, quiet routines. They can effortlessly rewrite the darkest, most terrifying rules. Modern society constantly judges women by harsh, unforgiving beauty standards. Clara finally proved that outward appearance never defines your true value. She was beautifully, unapologetically plus-size, and incredibly proud. Her lush curves did not make her weak or invisible. Her radiant confidence brought a dangerous mafia boss to his knees. You are absolutely worthy of fiercely protective, consuming love. You truly deserve to be treated like an absolute queen. Your unique spirit is your most beautiful, powerful asset. Never let anyone dismiss your incredible, vibrant inner light. Did you completely fall in love with this intense mafia romance? Do you secretly crave more thrilling, unexpected love stories like this? Hit that bright subscribe button right now for more weekly audio dramas. Please share this amazing video with your romance reader best friends. They will absolutely love this fierce, plus-size baking heroine. What will happen to Clara's Crusts Bakery under mafia protection now? Maybe it will become the dangerous new secret syndicate headquarters. Leave a comment below with your best wild predictions. We cannot wait to read your amazing creative theories.